Hello everybody, this is Train King James here, and I'm excited because we get to talk about the first fully animated CGI Thomas special. Ladies and gentlemen, and many others, may I present Hiro of the Rails. So Hiro of the Rails was released in fall in 2009, and of course we do our brief synopsis here. Spencer returns to Sodor to help with the Duke and Duchess's summer house and to cause trouble, during which Thomas discovers an old engine named Hiro, and now it's a race against time for Thomas and the other engines to get Hiro restored before he's discovered by the Fat Controller and Spencer. So, as you guys know, I do a personal story with these, and here are the Rails. I don't really have anything that unique. Similar thing to The Great Discovery, I continued my tradition of the Friday night pizza tradition, of being able to get this movie when I came home from school, got pizza, chilled in the living room, and that was the night. The one thing I do remember is a line always sticks out to me in this movie, and it's when Thomas first meets Hiro, and I believe it's something like, Thomas couldn't take his eyes off this extraordinary engine, and the line sticks out, not for any particular reason, but it's because, at the time, in school, this is kind of funny, extraordinary was one of our words of the week, although at this point I didn't know what that word meant, but it was kind of funny hearing a word of the week in a movie that I just got, so that was kind of cool, so it just always stuck out to me like that. I was always fascinated with, like, the language in Thomas, and, like, I remember learning to read off of, like, the Railway series and other Thomas books. I used to read them with my mom, and all the big words would stick out to me. Like, I used to love reading Percy Takes the Plunge, and especially when the word determination came up. So that was, like, my favorite thing to say growing up, so, yeah. Alright, long tangent over. Let's get over into the movie and talk about the good. And talking about the good, we gotta start with the plot. I think this is an overall good plot for the movie. I like that there's a lot of different subplots. You have, obviously, the building of the summer house, the missing mail cars for Percy, obviously restoring Hiro is your main plot, and all of this trying to keep, like, the Fat Controller away, and kind of doing this juggling act, and there's a lot of fun moments in the movie because of that. I think it's a rather unique Thomas movie, because it's not really something they do again, where they have to kind of keep something from the Fat Controller. It kind of gives me vibes of, like, the twin engines, like Donald and Douglas's introduction, where the engines are trying to keep things from the Fat Controller, and the Fat Controller is kind of, not necessarily an antagonist, but like a force of nature. In this special, there's some good tension, there's good action scenes throughout. But yeah, I enjoy the plot of this movie. I think one of the best parts of this movie is Spencer himself. This is, in my opinion, his big breakout appearance in the show. I think prior to this, he only appeared in about 5 episodes. And, you know, in those episodes, you know, he was fine, he was a good character. But, like, Spencer at this point in the show was just kind of someone who would show up every now and then. Like, he didn't show up in season 12. He was in season 11 a couple of times. Showed up again in season 10, season 8, season 7. So, at this point, like, he was just kind of a tertiary character, but I think this was kind of the special that made him like a secondary kind of character, where he was one of the first characters in CGI, and he got to bounce off of the characters more, we got to see him interact more, and, you know, it was not that uncommon to see him appear in episodes throughout the seasons from here on out, and he got a decent amount of appearances. So, I love what the movie did with him. It's a great look into his personality beyond just simple, just, you know, snobbery and uptight, you know, rudeness that he usually has. You know, it's kind of interesting that he's basically a Darwinist, you know, this idea of, like, he's like hell-bent on getting Hiro scrapped, and he wants to figure out what tricky Thomas is up to, and it's like, it's such an interesting angle to look at him, and he makes a very interesting, unique antagonist, in this movie, you know. I mean, right from the get-go, the movie doesn't waste time getting into it. Like, he comes to Sodor, he's immediately causing trouble, and I love that. I love his role. I love he has all of the best scenes and moments, and I love how parts of this movie is straight up just gaslighting Spencer into even more trouble than even he probably deserves. So there's a lot of great aspects to this film, and a lot of them do revolve around Spencer. Another thing I really like is the STEAM team in this movie, and I love the familial vibes. A lot of the characters here, because we get to hear them for the first time, get their own individual moments. For example, Emily versus Spencer, that little standoff was a fun scene. Kind of one of the last glimpses of old Emily in the show. But in general, I love how they're all kind of a unit, and once I love the scene when Thomas tells them about Hiro, and they're all, like, together, and we see them throughout the movie in various ways, kind of standing by each other and sticking up for one another, and I love the scene where they stand up for Thomas at Brenham Docks, and I don't know, I love it. It's a nice, wholesome look, where usually we see a lot of bickering, which I enjoy that too, but it's nice to see them really feel in sync with one another. I think the new characters are fun in this movie, and, you know, we gotta talk about the main character here, Hiro. I think he's got a very interesting backstory that I'll talk about later, but, I really like his role in the series. He feels like that old uncle / grandpa type in this movie that's kind of like a different kind of mentor for Thomas. You know, I love how gentle, and he's like this nice gentle giant. He gets a lot of lines that says a lot about his insight. Like, I've always loved the line about Gordon when he's talking to Thomas in Percy. He's like, when Gordon smiles, he changes his whole face. It is most interesting. And it's just like that little insight of Hiro hearing that. Like, just, we don't see that scene that Hiro is talking about, but Gordon must have met him at some point. He must have been grumpy or upset about something, and then to see Gordon smile, and especially knowing how expressive Gordon's faces used to be, like, yeah, you kind of have to agree with Hiro on that one. But again, he's a fun new character that has a lot of staying power in his series, and I love the ending to this movie, and what they do with Hiro. Victor, I really like as a character. You know, for a while it took me to realize that he's actually a Narragage character, but it was a fun Narragage addition to have at the Steamworks, which became a recurring location. Kevin's a fun character too at the Steamworks. Victor, I like him because he's a no-nonsense kind of guy. He's got good wit. He can bounce off the characters. There's times where, again, he kind of has that, you know, fatherly type vibe, or a mentor type vibe, where he can be someone that's like, he's kind of like the bartender in Cheers, where like people can go to him and talk about their problems and whatnot, stuff like that. And I think Victor fits that role. I think Kevin's a fun character. He doesn't get to do a lot in this movie, but I love the scene where he's like knocking stuff around, and Victor and Thomas use it to their advantage to kind of get the parts to kind of distract Spencer. I love it. Well, now we gotta talk about the voice cast, because from here on out in the show, the characters have voice actors. They got voice actors during Magic Railroad, and then that was a one-time thing. Other than that, we've had just single people narrating, and we still have Brandon and Angelus narrating, but I really do like the voice cast. They do sound a little different than what they'll eventually grow into as the show evolves. Some characters like Edward are a lot deeper. I think Toby a little too. But they mostly all work. There are some characters that you kind of have to like work with a little bit, but like, I think the casting is pretty solid. I think the one thing for me is that occasionally Gordon, James, and the Fat Controller can sound alike, depending on the moment and the scene, because they're all played by the same person. But other than that, I enjoy the voice cast. And we gotta talk about the elephant in the room. The first fully animated special. And we gotta talk about the animation. I think it's fairly good. Like, I wouldn't say it's the best animation Thomas has done, but for a starting place, especially for 2009, it mostly ages well. It was a fresh look for the series at the time, and we get some nice, unique angles, some beautiful shots here and there, and I thought the animation was pretty cool. So, now that we've talked about the good, let's get into what I would say is the bad. And again, a little nitpicky, but I think a little more issue-based than The Great Discovery, is what I kind of have here in the bad section. The pacing. I think the middle 20 minutes of this movie get very slow and repetitive. And this is something that happens a lot in CGI specials, where we kind of get, like, once we get through the exposition and we figure out, like, what the plot is, It's like, alright, now that we know where this plot's going, it's kind of like we just wait for the climax to get here, and as we're waiting, it's a lot of just back and forth certain locations. It's like Titmuss Sheds to Hiro's hideout, to the Steamworks, to Titmuss Sheds, to Hiro's hideout, to the Summerhouse, to Hiro's hideout. It's like back and forth, and a lot of the scenes do just feel repetitive. It's a lot of various Steam Team characters taking parts to Hiro, trying to avoid Spencer, all this stuff. And because of that, it can get a little boring towards the middle. It's really right up until the big chase scene with Hiro, Spencer, and Thomas is where the movie kind of picks up again. But that middle 20 minutes-ish of the movie is where it kind of gets a little slow. The animation during action scenes, I think, is the weaker part of the animation. I said it was mostly good before. I will say during certain action scenes, it does look a little computer gamey. It doesn't feel like they've quite had their style yet. Again, this is the first special. This is something that they'll improve on in the other specials, but the animation just didn't quite look as good. It didn't age as well. Mostly when, like, Thomas and Spencer are racing each other at points, like, there are certain shots that look a little weaker compared to the others. Speaking of weak, I did think the soundtrack to this movie was kind of weak. I didn't find it very original or anything, because a lot of the themes are things that we will hear throughout the rest of the CGI series. Nothing really stuck out to me. Like, I can't really remember what the core theme is. Like, a lot of specials have that, like, core theme to them, and this one really doesn't have that. Go-Go Thomas as a song is nice, but I wouldn't say it's, like, the best song. The last thing I wanted to complain about is just Hiro's backstory, and everybody brings this up all the time, and, you know, I'll be honest, like, is it the worst thing in the movie? No, but, like, it's more nitpicky. It just doesn't make sense, just with genuine continuity, that Hiro's the first engine on Sodor. I wish they could have engineered it a little better. But yeah, it's just okay. I like the concept of him having a backstory. I like the parts where we talk about him in Japan and we see his country in that different animation style. Just the explanation of him coming to Sodor and being the oldest engine, when Hiro is younger than a majority of the engines on Sodor, is kind of insane. So for our verdict. I think Hero of the Rails is a very good movie, but it's not a great movie. I think it's a good start to the CGI specials. It's a good first overall impression for CGI. I thought it was just an average Thomas special. Like, if you told me, right, out of all the Thomas specials, what is the most average one, I would probably say Hero of the Rails. It's a nice story, it's a beautiful story, but I think the special itself, like, you could tell this crew, again, not quite fully used to writing out longer specials yet, couldn't really figure out how to escalate the middle to the climax, but I do think there are really good scenes throughout, but the overall special is just good, which is not a bad thing to say at all. Like, it's not a bad special. Again, a lot of my bad things were more nitpicky than things that I think they need to fix. As for improvements, I mean, in general, I would just make tweaks. You know, tweaks to the script to help the pacing, tweaks to the animation just to make it a little better, tweaks to the soundtrack to make it more unique. And for Hiro's backstory, what if Hiro was an old engine that came from the mainland and visited Sodor one day, and then he broke down on Sodor and the mainland never came back for him? You know, he was just left abandoned, and he thought he'd be scrapped. I think that's a better backstory than having him be like the oldest engine of Sodor. It was weird that he's master of the railway in both Japan and on Sodor. I would have loved it if maybe he was master of the railway by the end of the movie. I think that would have been really cool, like something he earns before he goes back to Japan. And yeah, I think that really is all I have to say about Hero of the Rails. So I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Anyways, this has been Train King James, signing off.